Good afternoon, everyone. Buenos tardes. Welcome, Toros. Bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us today for It Takes a Village, the collective strength of our power in art and activism. I'm Dr. Talamonte. I'm a professor of history and academic Senate chair. Senate committed this year to an anti-racism and equity agenda, and we all know how desperately that is needed all across the United States and throughout the globe. And the It Takes a Village series are part of that commitment. The series was initiated by Senator Monique Turner, a professor in psychology and also a Toro alum. Go Toros. All right. And it was co-sponsored, has been and still is, by the Positive Psychology Lab, Associated Students Incorporated, Rose Black Resource Center, the Latinx Resource and Cultural Center, the American Indian Institute, the Veterans Resource Center, and has been supported by the volunteer efforts of students, faculty, staff, and administrators. It really does take a village. We are all grateful to those volunteers, our invited guest presenters today, and our art and activism contributors. And we thank all of you for attending today and throughout the series, and for the ways that you've contributed to a really powerful experiential learning environment, and for how you've been taking up the call for anti-racist actions at DH, and we know in the communities that we serve. So welcome, bienvenidos, and si se puede. And with that, I'd like to introduce the Assistant Director of the Veterans Resource Center, Ms. Marissa Nunes, who will lead us in our Tongva Nation land acknowledgement. Welcome, Ms. Nunes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Talamonte. So I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement and appreciation for the Indigenous caretakers of the land of Dominguez Hills is fortunate to call home. In the chat, we've provided a link to a land acknowledgement map. Please take a moment to enter in your zip code on, once you go to that link, enter in your zip code on that separate web page and locate the land that you live upon and acknowledge the Indigenous territories in the chat. So once you get that, once you find out the Indigenous territory, go ahead and take that name and put it in our chat box. And so you can acknowledge our land today. Okay, and with that, I'd like to begin with the acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered here today is the home and traditional land belonging to the Tongva Nation. Today, we come with respect and gratitude for the Tongva people who still consider themselves the caretakers of this land. It is through their examples that we are reminded of our greater responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and to take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
I'm going to now introduce our first presenter today, another Toro, and this is Ms. Kelly Hindergart, and she's an intern in our Office of Sustainability. She runs the campus urban farm. If you haven't been there, it's amazing. So when we get back to campus, please go out and visit. She teaches CalFresh cooking and nutrition education classes, and she does sustainability presentations like today to meet our campus needs. She's part of the Masters in Environmental Science program. She says she's learned a lot about environmental racism and the effects that our pollutants disproportionately have on low-income and minority communities. And so her presentation right now is going to give us all a brief introduction into that topic. And she says, being informed is the first step to creating change.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here with you guys. It's great to be here on Earth Day, especially. Thank you all for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get this started with you guys. So I'm going to give you a pretty condensed presentation on environmental justice just for the sake of time. But if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to any of us at the Office of Sustainability. We're always happy to talk with the community and answer any questions you might have. And without further ado, I will go ahead and get us started. So just to give you guys a brief introduction here, the CSUDH campus is one of the most diverse in the United States, which is awesome. We have about a 65% Hispanic and Latino population. We have 13.5% Black and African American, 10% Asian and Pacific Islander, just a little over 8% white, and 3% identifying as multiracial. So the reason this is so important to talk about is because a lot of our students in particular are from minority communities, and these communities tend to be the most affected by environmental racism. So our students in particular are susceptible to this, so it's really important to be informed about what's going on. So what's environmental justice? So environmental justice is still all about fulfilling that sustainable triple bottom line. That's of course taking care of the people, the planet, and profits, you know, making sure that our economy is still okay in the mix with all that. But the main point here is that we really want to ensure equal access to resources and equal protection from environmental risks, regardless of race or socioeconomic status, anything like that. So basically, we just want to protect the people who are least protected in our communities and really make sure that we're lifting them up, getting their input as we go in and try to restore these areas and things like that. And then there's just a little quote down here talking about how environmental justice and racism are connected. So it says, environmental racism exists as the inverse of environmental justice, when risks are allocated disproportionately along the lines of race, often without the input of the effective communities of color. And this quote is going to come up a couple more times. It's going to come to life throughout the rest of this presentation, so it should make a little more sense then. This is just a quick graphic to give you guys an idea of what is actually going on in the world of environmental racism. So when we say people are being affected by that, what does that actually mean? So as you can see here, African Americans, in particular low income ones, are more exposed to pollutants. So I don't exactly know what the scale is on this graph to the left, but basically this is just showing exposure to pollutants in general. It's a really generalized picture that shows a good mix of like air pollutants, water pollutants. You know, it's pretty much just an average of all those toxins that one could expect to come into contact with. So as you can see, low income groups of all colors are more susceptible, but especially our minority groups. So this is just to kind of visualize what we're going to be talking about here. So again, when we're talking about environmental justice, there's a couple of key things that are going to be coming up. Again, like I had mentioned, low socioeconomic status is a big problem. This is not just because these people are often going to be around more of these pollutants, they also have less access to some of these green things that we need to consider a luxury. Like we have more efficient appliances, we have electric vehicles, there's a bunch of different green products, there's solar panels, there's this, that, and the other. And if you're in a low income group, your first priority is likely not going to be sustainability. It's just going to be keeping yourself and your family comfortable, and healthy. So, you know, it's really not a priority for some of these groups to be sustainable. And there's of course physical barriers too. So they might live in less walkable neighborhoods. They might just have a general lack of green spaces like parks or, you know, any sort of outdoor area. And then, of course, we have the problem of gentrification, which is basically when governments or corporations come into an area that is experiencing some sort of environmental racism or injustice, and they kind of just take over and put it in a park here. They do a little farmer's market there, and then they're like, cool, this area is better now. But they don't actually go into those communities and take the input of the people who are living there, saying like, hey, what is going to make this area better, healthier, more beautiful for you? So when we look at, you know, a lot of these areas that are being improved by the city, that it's an awesome step that they're taking in the right direction, but we definitely want to make sure that we are talking to these low income or communities of color, because they are going to be the ones who know what's best for them, not us as the university or as a government entity, whatever we may be. We want to make sure that we're getting the input from everybody so that the planet and our communities are better for everybody. So environmental justice and racism is just another long list of injustices. This is nothing new. You know, people of color have faced a historic lack of resources, less access to well-paying jobs, poor infrastructure, police brutality, and just a lot of other social, economic, environmental injustices. So it's important to be aware of all of what's going on there. When you're trying to make an impact on an individual level, it can be a little bit intimidating, but the best things that you can do is, there's grassroots organizations, there's protests you can join in on, there's social media support, and then, you can just talk to your friends and say, hey, what do you actually need? You might not be able to solve the environmental racism problem as a whole. That takes all of us. It takes a village. But it's just important to be aware of what's going on in your communities and what different people need. And then, of course, you can try to talk to your politicians, your local politicians, your city councilmen, things like that, and just reach out and really do try to be a part of the change. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Thank you for letting me be here, and I'm going to put my email in the chat just in case there are any questions or comments. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me, and thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And I just want to say, I hope you were listening there. This is a session on art and activism, and the ways that we are thinking about what are our action items, right? So you can't change everything, but you can be a part of the solution. So think about the steps that you can take as part of your anti-racist practices, right? Anti-racism is an action. So with that, let me turn to our featured guests today. We have artist and art professor Devin Suno. We have Dr. Edward Kuraming from Teacher Education, who specializes in the relationship between education and ethnic studies. And we also have the Director of Service Learning, Internships, and Community Engagement. And this is Community Engagement Week. So thank you for being engaged here today and in the rest of the activities. And also the co-director of the American Indian Institute, Cheryl McKnight. And I'm going to turn it over now to Professor Suno.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today about my work. And especially thank you to all of the organizers who've been working on this really great series. It's great to feel the energy at DH, not just in talking, but in action. And I really feel that it's wonderful. I am an artist, a visual artist. I'm a professor in the art department, and I do a lot of work that's centered around art activism and mutual aid. I teach painting, but I also talk a lot about in my class how to engage community. And one of the things that I do often is I listen to my students, and I'm really interested in their perspective on our community and the types of work they want to do. And so I started this program called Praxis, which is our art engagement program. I wanted to start off by showing you this photograph. It's a family photo. This is a picture of my aunt and uncle incarcerated during World War II at the Rower concentration camp in Arkansas. And this is actually a school photo. And so I thought it was really appropriate for this lecture. And then also, I think thinking about mutual aid and incarceration and injustices in this country, one of the things that I've been really trying to teach myself more about is how we take care of each other, and how mutual aid in this moment is really important. But it's also been an anti-racist action that people in this country, and including my family, have been a part of for a long time. So in these camps, schools were created. They were not created by the people who run the camps. They were created by the families who were incarcerated. So I think a lot about that when I make my work and my art. And I think about that, and I think about how to collaborate with other people who are like-minded, but also experts in other areas of things that I'm working on that I don't know about. So this is a project that I did with our archivist, Greg Williams, and who has this great project at school that you should check out. It's called the Japanese American Digitization Project. And I collaborated with Greg and the archive and the Topaz Museum to make this artist book that has stories written by incarcerated children at these camps. And I actually found a piece of writing that was done by my aunt in one of these high school and junior high school newspapers. So this is me at one of my art exhibitions. This is the show that I did. It's called Residence. It's at a gallery called Residency Gallery in Inglewood. The title of the show is Shikata ga Nai, and it's crossed out. It's a wallpaper, which is behind me here, of the actual spot where my family lived at the Topaz concentration camp in Utah. So I visited there and I documented it. And then I started to reach out to other people, experts and other people who have had families in the same camps. And I made this body of work. These are paintings of that land, of that space that still exists today, that you can go and visit. And I use spray paint and acrylic on canvas and paint the native plants that are now overgrown in that location, and also in plants in Los Angeles that Japanese Americans planted after the war. So these are some images of that exhibition and those books that I made, and they honor my elders, my grandmother, and my great aunt, who are the last living people in my family who were incarcerated in those concentration camps. So at the start of the pandemic, I had just finished the show and I was in deep thought about all of these ideas and how to think about how to continue doing the kind of work that my family has done for a long time. And my wife, who is a nurse, was really at risk in her community. And so I actually decided to consciously to make a decision to stop making artwork. And I started making face shields with a coalition of other artists. And we made all these face shields, I think like over 20,000 of them. And we distributed them all over Los Angeles and all over the country, even in indigenous communities and also in Oaxaca, all over the place. I also started to do work with another coalition of artists called In Plain Sight. And we worked with 30 different organizations across the country and used airplanes to skywrite messages over detention centers and different historical areas where the US have incarcerated people. So I actually wrote a phone number, and when you call the phone number, this is what you heard.
I am 19. It was hard for me to turn 19 in May because of my birthday. I was detained at the Otay Mesa Detention Center. I fled El Salvador because of the violence and discrimination one faces there on a daily basis. Because of the lack of support for youth, I didn't come with any family members. I would like the world to know that as migrants, we are our family's hope, our country's hope, hope for a better society.
So this audio was English translations of letters written by people incarcerated currently by community members in Little Tokyo. And the recordings were accumulated by other artists. And that's what I've been thinking about a lot, is not making my own work, but also how to collaborate with other artists and amplify work that's already been done on the ground. And this is one of the really kind of exciting things that's happening amongst artists, is that we've been thinking a lot about how to do this type of work with on the ground activists. So after that, I started this organization with other artists and curators and cultural workers called J-Town Action and Solidarity. And we've been really focused on Little Tokyo's unhoused community and listening to unhoused people who are living there and thinking about listening to what they need. So this is actually Theo Henderson, who's one of our collaborators. And this is mutual aid work we do every week. We provide food, power, daily supplies, harm reduction needs. And we do it not just on our own, bringing things we think people need. We do it with a coalition of other grassroots organizations that are also focusing on that work. So I think a lot about my grandma. I think about the time that she's lived in Los Angeles and the time that she lived incarcerated, and how to take those experiences from my family and work. Like it says, it takes a village to do this anti-racist work and leverage the skills that I'm good at, which is being an artist. So thank you everybody for having me.
Well, let's give up some love to Devin Suno, artist,
Thank you, Devin Suno.
professor, and activist. I can't think of a better way to make that connection for us today as we begin to explore others' works, right? Between that collective strength of our power in art and activism, and the way that you went from the personal to the collective. And I hope you got some of the sense of the comments in the chat, how inspiring, the goosebumps, that I've got tears here in my eyes. It's just, we hope we can let you know how much we appreciate you giving us that powerful start. And we're going to turn it now to Dr. Alice Nicholas, who is going to bring us to the next level with some poetry.
Myself. I thought I was going at 5:15, so I'm really not prepared, but we're going to go with
You
what
know
we
what,
have.
Dr. Alice, that's me. I don't know what I'm thinking. I was just looking at you next
Oh.
to Devin, and I decided, oh, you must be next. Dear Ed, please forgive me. Dr. Edward Kerming is going to actually get us into the connection we make in our classrooms, right, to activism. And let me turn to you now. Thank you.
I had my my agenda up and I'm like, wait, am I tripping out? Okay, no, it's all good. Can folks see this?
Yes.
You see my cover slide?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. It's really great to be here. Thank you again, Chair Talamante and all the organizers for this powerful convening. My name is Dr. Ed Kerming, and for today, I'm gonna share a little bit about this topic titled Asian Americans in Education, Using Tools of Ethnic Studies and Critical Race Studies to Develop a Comparative Analysis. And thank you to my colleague, Professor Suno, because I think it's a really nice way to think about the linkages between the importance of history and art and our family histories and how we're affected by those. I would be remiss to not begin by stating that we are all experiencing multiple loss and grief in many ways, right? And so at the start of the pandemic, I found hope from the work of Iraqi artist Sundus Abdulhadi, and she says, quote, "We hold this space by grieving and healing together. We celebrate struggle and otherness because oftentimes these two experiences are synonymous." So what I want to do really fast is invite folks to kind of like take a breath together collectively. And I'm drawing from my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Stephanie Cariaga, who talks about embodiment, but then also bringing our whole selves here, right? So many of us in our community are grieving, are experiencing multiple losses. So I just want to invite folks to, you can either soften your gaze and just return back to our breath, and especially because we're holding so much to be here today. Thank you. So Abdul Hadi is really interesting because I think for this piece around otherness and struggling is really key, especially because on the heels of the immense white supremacist violence that's been ongoing, right? Like, how do we really name those particular things in response to how it's showing up for all of us in the collective, right? We're experiencing such a massive collective grief. I want to begin first by sharing about how I come to this work and how I'm primarily focused on teacher education. But my story starts literally under, part of my story literally starts under a mural, right? So this mural over here, if you imagine Locher Student Union, just kind of like all the different walls outside having beautiful murals like this. This is the Filipino American community mural at San Francisco State University outside of the Cesar Chavez Student Union. And for me, there's so much going on here, but as a Filipino American, I didn't know what any of these things meant, right? And so for me, I think this is powerful because until I found ethnic studies, or rather until ethnic studies found me, my life was completely transformed because there's so much history that when we might think that we would learn about this in schools, we didn't get that until, for me at this point, was when I was in college. I'm originally from the Bay Area, not the South Bay down here, but the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm a proud transfer student. I went to Ohlone Community College. I went to undergrad and my master's at SF State, where I taught ethnic studies with Pinay Pinoy Educational Partnerships. And then I moved down to LA to attend UCLA, where I earned my PhD in education. And now I'm an assistant professor in the College of Education. I share all of that because it's important to think about how, for me, ethnic studies and critical race studies in particular gave me a lens to articulate my family story, right? At the top there, it said my mom's from Pampanga, my dad's from Pasukan, Ilocos Norte, by way of Kauai, Hawaii, right? So the Hawaiian Sugar Plantation Association essentially recruited my dad's side to work in the fields of Hawaii, right? But it wasn't until I got into ethnic studies that allowed me a language to articulate what it means to be an Asian settler in Hawaii, right? And so I first want to begin by kind of teasing out what folks may or may not know about Asian Americans, right? So we might be, this is my approach to trying to be culturally relevant now. We might have some TikTok influencers. Y'all might be attuned to what's going on with TikTok. So if y'all have heard of it's the ... for me challenge, can I get a thumbs up? Have y'all seen this? Am I just the only one that's on TikTok? Okay, right? Y'all bought some stuff that you shouldn't have had, right? All right, so for me, what I want to think about is drop in the chat the first thing that comes to mind regarding Asian American, whatever comes to mind, right? It's the ... for me, whatever pops up. I got a couple of emojis. Okay, politeness. All right, me. All right, shout out to you. Smart. Okay, awesome artist. Noodles, smart, beautiful. Noodles, lumpia. Okay, serious and smart. Okay, this is fascinating to have. Cuteness, grandma, love it. Right? Okay, this is interesting, right? Because if this is the first thing that comes to mind, we have to think also about the way in which schools uphold and teach us, right? How we know about various communities, okay? So this is fascinating for me. Okay, so the next thing I want to ask y'all is thinking about your schooling, right? So if we can go back to when we were in K-12 schooling, what I want to ask you all is if you were able to have Asian American stuff, Asian American studies, anything Asian American in your K-12 formal schooling, drop a reaction in the chat. K-12 only. I see 2 no's. Okay, 1 heart, okay, 3. There's about 90 plus people in here. All right, so the next question I want to ask is, how about for college? If they're like, okay, we learned about this in college, Asian Americans in college. A couple, okay. Still, again, right, like I'm not good at math, right? Even though some people said that that's what Asians are. But right, like there's not nearly like even 100% of folks that are saying like, oh, this is what it is, right? So that's fascinating too, because my work talks about the importance of ethnic studies in schools, but I think it's also really important to name what does it even mean to be Asian American. Something I want to caution folks, especially around conversations around anti-racism, is that what happens oftentimes is that race, ethnicity, and nationality get conflated. And what I mean by that is sometimes often people use them interchangeably, right? Asian American as a racial category, and then we think about ethnicity and the many, many groups that are within Asian America, right? So it's important to tease that out because it's not one monolith, meaning there's not just one way or way of life, even though those characteristics that I asked previously are typically characterized for the Asian American community, right? So who is Asian America? This is a snapshot of who Asian America is. Within that, there's about 48 different ethnic subgroups, right? So when we think about that, or when we disaggregate what we think about with Asian American, oftentimes we see the nuance within this group, right? But what often happens is that it's usually propped up as a larger single monolith. I want to share a little bit about naming. It's important to know that the term Asian American emerged from the 1960s, right? It is a political term. It's tied to anti-racism, anti-imperialism, because the community said, this is who we are. It was a self-determined term, right? So those roots are really important because it signals us back to think about how then did we get to this moment to read about ourselves. And for many of us, for some of us, learning about our experiences when we got to college. So if you're unfamiliar, the movie that's playing in the background comes from the documentary film On Strike, which captured what happened at then San Francisco State College. So imagine this in the front yard of Loker, of Cal State Dominguez Hills. Imagine that happening here, right? It was a multi-ethnic, multiracial, intergenerational pushback to say we demand what my colleague and mentor, Dr. Alison Tintianco-Cubales and colleagues refer to as the arc of ethnic studies. They demanded access to higher education. They demanded a relevant curriculum that looked by people who look like them, like students of color in particular, as well as that the community should be very much tied to the institution, right? Oftentimes what happens though, is that this is taken for granted, right? That we have access to these courses, women and gender studies, ethnic studies. But Professor Glenn Umatsu says Asian American studies and by extension, ethnic studies confronted the historical forces of racism, poverty, war, and exploitation. Right. So again, it's important to think back, right? You might be able to see in the background that the state, right, the police were pushing back because ethnic studies really challenged the status quo, right? And it resulted in the longest standing student strike in the history of the United States because of students, right? Because of activists, because of folks demanding a relevant education. At the heart of it, ethnic studies was about political and critical consciousness and social change. Right. So when we leave Cal State Dominguez Hills, we hope that students will have a shifted critical consciousness, an awareness about ways in which they can use, in this case, art as activism to create social change. Okay. So my work, right, really challenges and tries to think about, okay, what's the relationship between schooling, right? Because all of us have been through the schooling system, most of us within the United States. I want to turn to my mentor, the late historian, Dr. Dambo Hulano Mabala, when she says, quote, perhaps more than any other colonial institution, the American educational system transformed the Philippines from a distant, long-neglected Spanish outpost to a full-fledged American colony. So when we're talking about art, back in the day, this political cartoons like this was the only image that you had of whoever else was outside the United States. This was primarily the cartoons, the images that we had. We didn't have social media back then, right? But if you look at it, I want you all to think about what it is that you all see here. Okay. I'm going to move the image a little bit further. And the quote says, school begins. All right. Drop in the chat what it is you see. Daniel said the inferiority, people of color. Okay. Also think about too, like Denzel, right? Like how are the folks of color characterized, right? Stereotypes. Okay, great. Getting schooled. Okay, awesome. These are really, really fantastic observations, y'all, right? So if we look over here, if you look at the folks over here, Philippines, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Cuba, right? Like the way that they're characterized was infantilized, meaning that this is why the United States needed to be everywhere, because look at these poor children, right? But if we also apply a critical race or ethnic studies lens, we can turn to the tenet of CRT around experiential knowledge. We know that actually these images were incredibly harmful, right? Because if you see who is allowed to be a part of the classroom setting, we know that the Black man in the window is a racialized body, and he's not necessarily a part of the learning environment, rather he's labor. And if we turn over here, we see what is perceived as a Native American, their book is turned upside down. The Chinese person outside is not even allowed into the classroom, which props up racist nativism and genocide, right? And it's important to also know that the Indian boarding schools was the template for then what would happen later on in the Philippines, right? So again, if we take one critical race studies lens, ethnic studies lens, we can see that there's multiple colonialisms, and we can understand how empire has shaped schooling, right? So it's important to think comparatively about, like, okay, all of us have really been affected by this, and we tend not to critique or understand the criticality about how these ideologies have circulated to know about various communities. Really fast, the Thomasites came to the Philippines, right, aboard the USS Thomas. 500 white American teachers essentially just came to the Philippines to teach, right? Primarily only in English, right? When you have a Philippine nation with upwards of 7,000 islands, right? Multiple languages, and primarily English is going to be the language, so much gets lost. And that was by design. The United States did this by design as a weapon of empire, right? So some of this was curriculum, right? On the left-hand side is the US flag. Again, in the Philippines, we're thinking about this, right? My colleagues and I have written about this, how this is actually a culturally irrelevant curricula, in the same sense that there are state-sanctioned textbooks that are propping up patriotism and family structure. And if you look to the right even further, capitalism, because it's talking about what you can purchase and buy. So with that said, right, like, how can we think about critical race studies and ethnic studies as praxis, reflecting, thinking about putting this into action? Well, how do we interrogate power systems in comparative analysis? How do we also interrogate and understand imperialism, sexuality, language, ability, racialization, and gender as part and parcel to how schools are functioning, right? We're not questioning what's going on in these, in the official, what they call the official curriculum. I want to leave you all with this Philippine historian Renato Constantino, who wrote The Miseducation of the Filipino, inspired by Carter G. Woodson. He says, quote, "The most effective means of subjugating a people is to capture their minds." And so what I press my teacher candidates, the ones that I work with, is also, we're going to be doing a lot of unlearning, because we know that K-12 schooling can be very hostile to folks of color, right? We know that what we're learning is oftentimes, if you even have access to higher education, is when you begin to get a glimpse of learning about yourself and seeing yourself reflected in the literature or what you're learning. I want to provide some resources for you all. You can put up your phone. This is a QR code where dozens of Filipino scholarship, Asian American scholars. I'll drop it in the chat too to this, because part of our work is to study, right? Miriam Kaba says, hope is a discipline. And part of that is also studying how we can be better at unlearning, especially when some of the things that we learn have not been a part of the official curriculum. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to more conversation.
And that was a fabulous 10 minutes of a lot of history, right? I'm a history professor. You are speaking my language. It's wonderful to see it from critical race theory and education perspectives. I teach European history, so I teach about imperialism. We make connections about imperialisms, right, in the world in the 19th and 20th century and origins prior to that. And I'm taking notes here, taking lessons. So thank you so much. And maybe sometime I can invite you in to do a little time with my students, because I hope you've been watching the comments there. This is so powerful, so necessary. And that unlearning, that was so important, I think, for all of us to hear, right? Is when we talk about systemic and institutionalized forms of oppression, and then we link it to education. Unlearning, I think, is such a important concept for us. So thank you so much. And let me turn now to Cheryl McKnight, and she is going to make some wonderful connections for us with our Native American community and students, and sharing more powerful learning opportunities.
Okay, can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, screen is up. You all are a tough act to follow. I want you to know that. So what I'm going to talk about today, everybody thinks I'm going to talk about Native American Indians and surprise. What I'm going to talk about is bicultural identities. Bicultural identities are, from my experience, the least represented of the peoples that that we talk about. And I came to this in a research project I did some years ago in interviewing bicultural people. Now, ethnicity and culture aren't necessarily the same thing. People can be from several ethnicities, but still maybe only relate to one culture. So I identified people that I felt were fully bicultural and spoke with them about their worldviews and their self-identities. And I found some commonalities in that the people I interviewed most felt underrepresented and most felt least understood. They reported many similarities. They felt that they didn't belong to either ethnicity. They felt like the other, the outsider. They felt that they were pressured into either identifying with one ethnicity or the other, or that they weren't accepted by either, even though these were their families. And so in a way, it sort of felt to a lot of them like being the child of divorced parents. And so they also felt that they had to code switch a lot from culture to culture, and that they had a wider worldview than their friends that identified with one culture. And in many ways, now this is important, they felt like a bridge between, say, the two cultures. So the poster I have up here was done by Francisco Chexinco. He's our resident artist in SLICE. And he's also enrolled to Assiniboine. So anyway, what I'm also going to do is read to you from a journal that's being produced where our anthropology students are interviewing various members of our Native American community, our local community mostly. But before I get to that, after doing that research, I interfaced with a lot of our students that are at that Black-Red interface. The Black Indians is what they call themselves, or at least to me. And I showed a video on Black Indians and American Story as a presentation and invited students. And what was interesting is it wasn't just Black Indians that showed up, but students from various ethnicities that said, you know, I came to Dominguez Hills to talk about this, but no one's given me the opportunity to talk about this. And they all had stories to tell, their own stories. So that's what we did. So what I'm going to read to you is the rough draft for the journal that's going to come out called Native Voices. It's written by or interviewed by Heather Gueron and Madison Medhat, two of our Anthro students. So Delana Studi is a Cherokee actor, activist, and advocate whose work and achievements have helped pave the way for more opportunity and recognition for the Native community. Studi was born to her full-blooded Cherokee father and German-Irish mother in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Studi grew up between two worlds as her parents' religious practices and experiences differed from one another. As an example, her father, who is full-blooded Cherokee, would go to ceremonies, whereas her mother, who is German-Irish, would go to church. Living between these two worlds allowed for an appreciation of both religious practices, as well as the importance of acknowledging and respecting other religious beliefs. Studi reveals that her full name in Cherokee is translated to Golden Gate. Her father named her this because she was the bridge that connected the two worlds of her parents. While Studi was able to learn the importance of other beliefs and traditions, she was also forced to learn about racism at a young age through these experiences. When she was young, she began to see how differently her parents were treated. She would, depending on who she was with, She would be treated like a white child when she was with her mother and treated like a Native Indian when she was with her father. She explained that the experiences would differ depending where she was with, who she was accompanying. When her father would take her to the mall, they were searched to make sure they weren't shoplifting or carrying anything illegal. Whereas with her mother, employees in shops went out of their way to be helpful. Studi was able to catch on to these patterns quickly. Studi started the interview by telling us about how different her parents were growing up. Her father grew up speaking Cherokee as his first language until the age of 9. He, like many other Native children, were forced to enter boarding schools that would force him to assimilate into society. The boarding school he attended was called Sequoia. These boarding schools were one of the many ways in which the US government attempted to force assimilation onto Native communities. The experiences faced with these schools were never pleasant. Children were forced to learn English, go to church, and let go of their tribal traditions. She stated her father never spoke much about these experiences within boarding school until they made their trek to the Trail of Tears. And for those of you who may not know, it's when the Cherokee were relocated to the reservations in Oklahoma, and it was grueling. A lot of them died. They walked on foot, men, women, and children. Till this day, the school site is up, but it's no longer a boarding school. It's now a cultural school. Okay, we talk about the Trail of Tears. Okay. Oh no, we miss here. You'll have to pardon me, I'm not as articulate. Anyway, she made till this day, another element in her childhood showed the racism of her town and the education system was when her kindergarten teacher was telling the story of Thanksgiving. Her teacher gave the same sugar-coated version of history we still hear today, but afterwards said, now all Indians are extinct. I've actually heard that myself. Not knowing what extinct meant, Studi took the new word to her father. When he told her what it meant, it broke her heart. In kindergarten, her teacher told her that her people were dead and gone while she was sitting right there. So then we talk about the Trail of Tears. Her father decided they were going to retrace the Trail of Tears. This was a devastating event for the Native community, as it one of the many events that displaced thousands of Native people in order for the US government to seize the land. Studi retraced the path of the Trail of Tears with her father, the same path her ancestors took before her. This trek took about 990 miles from North Carolina to Oklahoma. Remember, this was on foot. Studi worried that this trek would negatively affect her father, triggering him back to the days in which he had to endure the punishment of the boarding school. She states, I died on that trail, but her father came alive. And if you look here, you'll see this little girl who is bicultural, that a lot of the families would tell me that even though they were enrolled, they were not accepted as Native American. So we thought this is good to put a picture showing this girl. You can see she's bicultural. So what happened is when Francisco did this poster, I said, well, I can't use it until we get a photo release from her mother. So Steve, a Yaqui son of mine, took it to another powwow and saw the child. It was on his phone and he showed her, he said, is this you? And she screamed. She ran, he said, I got to talk to your mother. When the mother saw this poster, she broke into tears. This is how much people need to be validated as human beings, and they need to have a right to be who they are and not have to choose. So I'm going to show you, excuse my desktop, I'm going to have to show you, my desktop is about as articulate as I am. So here we go. Thank goodness Devin showed me how to do this. So Miami framed this for the mother and the daughter and gave it to him. And we felt that this was a form of activism. It's a quiet form of activism. It's subtle, but we helped do some healing that day. And I think that's a big part of what art is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I just want to say, your connections to student work and the power of oral history as a service learning tool, right? What they're learning about the communities and what they're going to be able to share with others through their publications is an exceptional form of learning and activism. And thank you for making those connections also with one of our students as well, who Francisco, right?
Yeah.
Who works in.
He was too shy to do this himself. And I said, well, we're going to show this and you're being represented. And I just want to say the thing we need to remember, the big thing about anti-racism is just validate each other and validate each other's respect for their own identity. And thank you. And again, I apologize for my lack of being articulate.
There's no apologies at all. Bravo. It was fabulous. Thank you. And now, yes,
Wait, Mr.
some love for all of our guest presenters. We have a few more in a little bit. And I'm going to turn it over now to one of our indomitable organizers, initiators of this series, Monique Turner, Professor Monique Turner.
Hi, so many great presentations that really celebrate our differences, and that was one of the goals for this event. And so we sent out a call about a couple of weeks ago to kind of gather different creative works of how different students and faculty can kind of express their ways of activism. And so I'm just going to share that briefly. I also put in the chat a link to all of the artworks as well, because we won't really have enough time to go through all of them, but we want these to kind of be discussed in the breakout room. And so you can take a look at them, go through. They are split up into 4 different PowerPoints because the document was large, but just pick maybe a couple that you guys could kind of share or whatever resonated with you for you guys to discuss in the breakout room. So I'll show a few right now, and I'll kind of just walk us through for a couple of minutes. And so I'm sorry if I'm not able to show the whole slide, but hopefully we can show the rest of it at the end of the event as well. And so these images right here are actually flyers that were created by Abigail Liberty Norman, who is Thomas Norman's daughter. And she created these for our event so that we can kind of create some type of social media flyers for them. And so she recently did the one with the Black background recently. And then these are some of the flyers that were initially made when we first began the It Takes a Village discussion series in September. And so Erica Torres from the Faculty Development Center helped us to create these. And then we transitioned to the Department of History with Raul Rubio. And he created these flyers. We also wanted to integrate a different language because our our campus is predominantly Latinx population. And going back to Kelly's presentation earlier, she kind of showed that breakdown of the demographics. And so we wanted to really invite others to join in, although we were focusing on all different types of populations, specifically those that identify as American of African descent. This is artwork from Joshua Zion Hunter, which is our one of our student facilitators. He took time to create this. So hopefully in a breakout room, he could kind of share his thought process behind it and what kind of inspired him to create this. So you all saw this earlier. Happy Earth Day. This was another piece of work that another student from the CSUDH campus village submitted. And I believe she also created shirts with it as well, with the same logo. And so this really emphasizes human rights and understanding that we need to respect each other despite our differences, and really in our differences, that is where the unity resides. And so go to the next one. This was another, I think this was a post, an Instagram post that a student posted from my class and also submitted for the call. And it was during the time when President Parham had sent out an announcement to see how we can all support by posting on social media, Stop Asian Hate. So she posted this one. And these are other ones. And this was just a little word art that another student did to be creative with different words to see how you can express it. And we just had a nice presentation from Cheryl McKnight. And this beautiful image and also the story that is attached to it. And we do want to acknowledge the recent verdict related to George Floyd and all the others who have lost their lives that identify of African diaspora to police brutality and other groups as well. Some other artwork and also a short poem. I didn't even know that it was National Poetry Month. And so I want to kind of share this, which is really powerful, and an image that my son created to support Black Lives Matter. And then I will end with a little music that Dr. Nathan Gottlieb submitted. And so I just want to make sure that I have my audio shared, and then we can review the other submissions a little later and also in the breakout room.
We have something hip that we want to present to you. We have something hip that we want to present to you. Black music, music that is Black oriented. It's all the same thing. Black music. It's not really all the same thing. It's kind of out of the same thing.
I'm sorry. All right.
Right.
I'll go
So,
ahead.
we're going to go ahead and everybody's just going to be put into a room. So continue the conversations around art and activism and the contributions from folks across our campus. So thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to add that the link is going to be put in the chat again, so you guys can have access to the different artwork.
And so if you have any trouble getting into a room, just say your name and we'll find you and we'll put you in a room.
Dr. Telemonte, tell me about the breakout rooms and what's going to happen there.
Well, we are going to have student facilitators who are going to share some of the art pieces and ask folks to, what are their impressions? What does this make them? Connection do they see between art and activism? How are they inspired? What are things maybe that they're doing? It really is just a time to share and appreciate, celebrate our, the diversity that has been brought to us today, but also the work for equity and inclusion, because it's not enough to be diverse, right? We also have to make sure that everybody has the same kinds of opportunities and ability to connect with one another too. I think that gives a sense of it.
And how do I get to a breakout room if I don't know how to do it?
Good question, Ms. Walker. So you should be looking to see if there's something that says join. You can click on, I believe it's more at the bottom of your page perhaps, and it'll show breakout rooms. Does that sound right, Ms. Walker? And then some of us are just helping you get into rooms by assigning you quickly. There's a note that all breakout rooms will close in 19 seconds. I don't think that's what we want to happen.
No.
If they close, we can open them back up
Okay.
and try to help people to just get.
Yeah,
in
we're
the room.
helping them into rooms. We just want to make sure the rooms don't.
Yeah, they're gonna close and
They
they're all,
are gonna close.
I'm opening all rooms. Oh crap, sorry.
That's all right. We know technology will challenge us and we're all going to be patient. So, are we reopening the rooms?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, there, everyone's back. You might want to let everyone know what just happened.
We had a technical difficulty. We're going to do that again. So get ready for entering into your art and activism party room once more.
It keeps trying to send me to room 3. I'm supposed to be in room 2 for Nicole.
We'll put you in, Nicole. One moment.
Thank you.
We're having, actually, Suzanne, we're having technical difficulties. It's going to close the rooms again.
I changed it to 30 minutes and it's bouncing back. Ay, 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 ay.
Maybe try 300. That might be.
We just ask for your patience till we figure out how to get everybody in their room.
After 30 minutes. Laura, are you able to see that or not?
It hasn't.
Under up, it says 30 minutes.
And if we want to.
Okay, so I'm going to open all rooms right now. Okay, they're open. Chris, 29 dash. I don't know. We're just going to try.
Yeah, the breakout room option is open now at the bottom of the screen, which is great. But I was wondering, how are people deciding what number room to go in?
We're assigning. It's just random today, except for our student facilitators and the faculty and staff moderators.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So if there's any students that we need to move to their room, could you tell us what number, your name and what number?
Kim Manuel, row 1.
Kim, okay, room 1.
Prashante Hill, room 2.
Dina, room 1, please.
Vanessa Yanez, I have no idea what room.
Any room you wish.
3. There you go. I can see it. Thanks.
Okay, it shows that the breakout room will close in 30 minutes. Thank you. Oh my goodness.
Thank you.
Can someone help me? I need to go to room 4, please.
Armando?
Mhm.
Okay.
Consuela, did you want to have a specific room that you wanted to be in, or?
This is Patricia, room 1.
I got you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Brian Martinez, room 2.
Sending you to room 2 now.
I think I was in room 4.
Room 4. Okay. There you go.
This is Dina. I'm supposed to be in room 1 and it keeps sending me to room 2.
Okay, I can switch you because I see
Thank
your
you,
name
Professor Turner.
in room 2, and then I'm gonna move you to room 1. You look on your toolbar.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm just gonna join a random group. I wasn't assigned one.
Oh, Ed, I thought I put you in a room, but
It says room
No.
2.
Oh, for
I
me?
sent you, there should be a join for you. You have been assigned.
Okay, I'll go there right now. Thank you.
Uh-huh. And Monique and I'm not sure if it's Crystal or other captioner have not been assigned, but everybody else has been assigned to a room.
Okay. I'm not sure what room is the captioner going to? Oh, it doesn't matter. Okay. Because it doesn't show anybody else unassigned but you. So they already been assigned. They went.
Right.
Okay, cool. All right.
So go ahead, Suzanne, join.
It's not popping up for me.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I don't have the ability to assign you. You can just go in and assign in a room. You just pick a number and that join on the right.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Welcome back from the breakout rooms. I'm sorry that was a bumpy return and a bumpy start, and we thank you for your patience at this time of the semester and this time of the one long year of pandemic conditions. And I know that everybody is doing their best here. So we have a guest who's about to rejoin us. And so I'm going to just take a breath here. And Monique, do you want to talk about some of these images while we wait for Ronnie to read? He has an event at 5:30 at the Latinx Cultural Resource Center. So he's kind of bouncing between right now.
All right. Yeah. And I think
he's
you're ready, Ronnie. Okay. All right.
Okay, fantastic.
I'll stop my share.
We were just explaining that you have another event that starts at 5:30, and so you had to duck out for just a moment, but you are here and ready to go. So please welcome our next featured guests today. We have the director of the Latinx Resource and Cultural Center, Ronnie Castellanos Raimundo. We also have Dr. Alice Nicholas, an Africologist in the Department of Africana Studies, and Dr. Hal Weary, a pianist, composer, scholar, and educator in the Department of Music. And I'm going to turn it over to Ronnie now, our new director, and welcome to DH.
Thank you so much, Dr. Talamante and everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Ronnie Castellanos Raimundo. I use he, they pronouns. And it is a pleasure to be here. As you may know, we have a virtual Latinx Cultural Resource Center. And so I'm just really excited to share with you all tonight. And so we do in fact have another event, and you know how we're really trying to support different efforts in different parts. I'm so grateful to be here and to share with everyone. Our Latinx Cultural Resource Center actually comes from student activism, right? So around February of 2020, Janet Nájera, who you see here, was one of the leaders spearheading and advocating and saying, we need a resource center for our Latinx students. We know that our campus is over 60%, 65% Latinx students. And this term is not the most perfect term, but it is the term that we're using right now, right, moving forward. And so we understand that maybe folks may not identify as Latinx. They can say, oh, I'm Hispanic, or I'm Latino, Latina, or Latine, which is the new term that is now being used. But I really want to highlight about how, you know, it is often students who really move the ground, right, shake the ground for us to become aware. And so the goal of the Latinx Cultural Resource Center is it's about supporting the personal, professional, cultural, academic journey of students at DH and beyond, right? So our goal, right, hopefully, is that we're going to continue to get to know one another, our students, our staff, faculty, so that we can then say, hey, this is going to be our mission, this is going to be our work, because we understand the solidarity and the need and the urgency to be with one another in community during these difficult times. And so, as you can see, here is another picture, right, of Jeanette meeting with Dr. William Franklin with Student Affairs. And so really emphasizing the commitment of these resource center to disrupt forms of oppression and to Blackness and create solidarity across minoritized communities. And so one thing I wanted to share is that I know there's been news shared around the new the development of the API Center as well. And so thinking about how do we then continue to be in solidarity with our students, staff, faculty, especially the community members, as we're seeing hate crimes, violence, xenophobia that is across different many communities. And so I wanted to share some of this, you know, thinking about student activism, right, student art around that. Activism comes in many different ways. And sometimes could be email, could be creating the list of demands, right? What are the needs of students? What are the needs of the members of the community? And so I wanted to share that Jeanette, you know, identifies as a queer woman of color. And so knowing that often activism comes from folks we might not even know of, right? And often really invisible. So I wanted to share around the importance of creating space. We just happened to have our Central American Week, right? So that was the work that was needed and highlighted. And we understand that our Central American diasporic experience is not just about like, oh, this is where I belong, or this is where I'm from, by ethnicity, but it's really about knowing that there are Black Central American folks, Central American Indigenous peoples. And so we're really excited to share and really continue to do the work, even though it is difficult during these hard times. So I wanted to highlight two of our student leaders that we've been able to hire this semester. And so Grecia Gonzalez Guzman and Jeanette have been two of the leaders behind creating the Latinx Center. And so this is, I think, for me, an honor to share that there's been women of color, right, queer folks of color, that continue to move the needle forward, so that we can understand and see clearly what are the needs of the community. And so I'm gonna stop there. You know, and just gonna have a moment to just share that I feel that this work as a collective is needed, and I look forward to us continuing the work. And it's not going to be easy, and I think sharing this with Dr. Talamante, right, about how do we make the decisions that we are doing the best we can, we are doing enough during these times, and that our existence, even though I wanted to say thank you to everyone for allowing me to briefly share a little bit about the history that is being, live, right? Like done in our next center or collectively, even when it's rough during these difficult times. So big shout out to the It Takes a Village committee, because it really does take a village. It takes more than what we may think. And I'm excited to see the art that was highlighted from students, and we need more of that. So I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share a little bit more about our own students and the activism they are doing.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. And I just think it was a really powerful choice you made, because I know you originally were going to share a Central American virtual museum with us, and then you really thought about this. And, when we're thinking about activism, it was our very own DH students, right, who made it possible for the center to exist, for you to come to our campus, and to start making a space for our students that they can, create and be activists and learn and teach and make their own. So thank you so much. Have a great event. And we know that you have to go, but we appreciate you for joining the It Takes a Village team and for being one of our featured guests today. And let's send it, Ronnie, some love.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Castellanos.
Thank you. And now I turn.
Look forward to continue working with you.
Thank you. And now I turn to Dr. Alice Nicholas, who's going to lift us up with her poetry. And I've been excited to hear it, right? I was trying to make you go early in this show here. So please.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Monique. What an honor it is. I appreciate the fact that we recognize, especially on our campus, I'm a Toro for life, bachelor's and master's, and I came right back after I completed the PhD. So I'm definitely a Toro for life, and I appreciate the fact that we are having these conversations. They're so important. So my presentation to you has changed a few times over the last couple of days. The gist of it is still there, but because history is ongoing and there are things that we have to address in society, it's shifted a little bit. So let me go ahead and start this. So today we're going to look at the idea of poetry not being a luxury. And this is based on Audre Lorde's essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury. Before we start, we have to understand the importance of the word. And I don't know about many of your upbringings, but in my upbringing, we were always taught to watch our tongue, to watch what we say, right? To understand that the power of the word has the ability to bring life or bring death. So you can injure or you can heal with the word. Black artists have to work within that, understanding that there is power in their words. So from her 1977 essay, Poetry is Not a Luxury, she talks about the fact that a lot of times if we look at art in particular and poetry as an aspect of art, through a Eurocentric lens, then we're looking at it with this idea that it's just set to entertain us, just set, to bring a little bit of beauty or pretty into this world. And this is something that we can definitely do, but there is also a function to poetry, especially for Black artists and for marginalized people like Black women, where poetry then becomes this tool. It becomes, as Lorde says, this vital necessity of our existence, right? So it forms the quality of the life within, which we predicate our hopes and dreams towards survival and change. So we have these ideas and we have these visions, but in order to give them any power of manifestation, we have to make them into a language. That language turns into an idea, and then idea becomes this tangible item. So Audre Lorde says it's the way we help give name to the nameless so that it can be thought. This follows W.E.B. Du Bois's criteria of Negro art in 1926, where he says all art is propaganda, and it must be. And so he has no patience for this any other type of writing, right? But he says that it all has to be used for propaganda. It all has to be used to forward a certain message. In 1926, that message was to gain the rights of Black people, just to be alive, to live life, to love, to enjoy life. And like he said, he didn't have time for anything or any form of art that is not used for propaganda. So we're talking about Black art. Amiri Baraka in Furious Flower talked about the strongest political work you can do is in the arts. And so we know that he is one of the artists, one of the founders of the Black Power movement. Black Arts Movement was the sister movement to the Black Power movement. I'm not going to read this whole poem, but I'll provide the link for you, or you can copy the link of him actually reading this poem. But in this poem, Black Art, he wrote this poem when he was angry. It was right after the assassination of Malcolm X, and he had just moved to the East Coast and set up the Black Arts Theater. But his idea is that poems were worthless unless they had this function. And sometimes that function was ugly, because we have to confront in order to challenge and change. The role of the Black artist, according to Elizabeth Catlett, Black art touches upon the cultural and social necessity to combat purported US racist domination of Black art. So there is a function to this resistance, this challenge, and this change. And so there are two possibilities. You can either enter and establish oneself into this existing US art world, which means that you would have to assimilate and you would lose some of your cultural relevance. Or on the other hand, you could participate in this movement towards Black liberation, into using your art form, your Black art, as this propaganda towards Black liberation. In the West African tradition, this is the Jelly, which is for boys and men, and the Jelly Musa, which is for girls and women. It's the traditional historian and the keeper of the culture. So they're the storytellers, the poets, the musicians, the praise singers, and they're highly respected in these societies. In this tradition, they keep lineages going back centuries. They speak of proverbs to enhance and to nurture, the morality of the people, of the culture. So in 2019, I was inducted as the inaugural Jelly Musa in the Department of Africology at Temple University. And there's a responsibility that comes along with that, and responsibility has to fall within what was put forth by W.E.B. Du Bois, right? This idea that we don't have time, especially in 2021, in April of 2021, we don't have time for this luxury of poetry. We have to use our poetry as a form of propaganda to tell the truth about what's going on in society, and also to challenge that truth and to understand the power of our words to be able to change that truth. So summer of 2020, I published the 9th volume of my 10 Million Story series, because I do have a responsibility. If I'm supposed to call myself a poet or a Jelly Musa, then I have a responsibility to reflect on society. And so this actual volume, and I started the series in 1999, but this actual volume actually reflects on what's going on in society, centering the Afrocentric paradigm. So I kind of look at everything and then take a relook at it and ask myself, How does this look from my cultural perspective? And how can this help to forward my culture into liberation? And so I wanted to read this piece from the collection. And this one is a reflection on 2019, week 28. And it's called Rememory, Our Spirits Remember. My heart goes out to everyone living in fear today of ringing doorbells, of no-knock entrances, of snatchings away. I intend to share this smile in me, Phoenix, rising from the ashes, sadness, eagle on a journey to higher heights, joy. I wish to reveal, to rebel, rememories, visions of small ones and giants, of resistance, of persistence, and of victory. I, metaphoric butterfly, aim to spread this peace in me, fought for long and hard, held like breath, protected, then released as prayer. Reminisce, reflect. We thought we could, and we did. We think we can, and we will. For our spirits remember the way to freedom. In 2019, in The Source of Self-Regard, which is her collection of essays and speeches, Toni Morrison wrote, writers, journalists, essays, bloggers, poets, playwrights can disturb the social oppression that functions like a coma on the population, a coma despots call peace, and they staunch the blood flow of war that hawks and profiteers thrill to. So as artists, we have a responsibility to create, to affect change. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you see the applause. I think it's a little noise, folks. You could turn on those mics, make a little noise. Woo!
Ooh, that's my teacher right there.
Oh, one of my scholars is in the house. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Alice.
Thank you.
And I love the way you built up to that, and then you took us, right there, right? That just like breath held, that struggle, that getting there, and it an ongoing process, right, of becoming. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
I want to turn it over now to Dr. Hal Weary, who's going to make some connections between art and activism with his own musical compositions. So, Dr. Hal.
Okay, thank you so much. I really enjoyed everything, and thank you, Chair Talamonte, for this program, and soon to be Dr. Turner. Okay. So thank you very much for allowing me this opportunity to share with you, my musical journey, and just, my thoughts on anti-racism and things of that nature, and a project that I believe exemplifies, and kind of, it's a culmination of the aspects of things that we've talked about today, but it's auditory as opposed to visual art. Yes, thank you, Dr. Turner. So I know how difficult it is, that the process of going through the dissertation and all of those things and the hoops they make you jump through. So, and you're doing such a fine job with, taking, your leadership with It Takes a Village. And I just have to say kudos to you and hang in there. And I think it's commendable to still, work towards your doctorate, but do all of these other things and all the great things you do. So I'd say my hat is off to you. And also Chair Talamonte as well. But I was in the background working on ballots, and trying to get things prepped. So I was like, I hope I have a few more minutes. Okay. But let me just share with you just briefly, I won't be long. Just my project and it's just one moment here. I'm going to share. Can everyone see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so let me just okay, start. So my name is Dr. Weary. I'm assistant professor of music with an area of focus in the music industry in the Department of Music, and I also serve as a parliamentarian for Academic Senate. A project that I recently completed and that I am in the process of releasing is a project entitled Serendipity. And this is the band that recorded with me at Capitol Studios. I'm not sure if you're all familiar with Capitol Studios. It's a major landmark here in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. But I want to point out this picture here that, as you can see, you know, we come from different backgrounds here. You know, our bassist, he's an actor, but he's a graduate of USC, and Jonathan Snow, excellent jazz bassist. Adam Safferty, he is Latinx and the chair of Latin percussion at USC, and he played percussion on our recording. And then we have Jonathan Chamberlain, who is he holds some high position there at Capitol, but anyway, we'll get to him. He's also a fantastic person, but European American and guy, and he plays drums. He played drums on our recording, and of course, there's me there in the middle, pre-COVID. You know, I packed on a few more pounds after. I wish I could get into that, but and then we have Dr. Teodros Avery, who is a colleague of mine here. He's in the music department, and he's assistant professor of jazz and commercial music and saxophone. And we have Mr. Chris Lowry, and he's originally from Oakland, California. I think he had just flown into LA from another gig to play on our recording. Fantastic jazz trumpeter. So as you can see, we come from different backgrounds, but music is a universal language. And, you know, we can tell that the world is in need of music. You know, concerts, unfortunately, the performance world has really suffered from the pandemic, and it has an adverse effect on the world. And, you know, we tried to make do with streaming and things of that nature, and watching concerts through YouTube and you know, movies and things, but it's not the same as experiencing music live, okay? And so that's something that I want to point out, is that, you know, eventually these things will come back and we will have access to that, but nevertheless, music is still something that is a universal language, and it unifies us. So this project was great because it had a unifying theme, serendipity, and the music was very inclusive. We had music from Latin America, music from European America, classical music, jazz, world music. And it was really kind of like this gumbo, this musical gumbo that really culminated in a really, I think, successful project. There's the album cover, and of course, if you can see the background there, that's our very own Laser Hall. I'm not sure if you could tell if that's Laser, but I like the little background there. The original composition is the composition that I wrote. But I want to play a piece for you that really exemplifies some of my roots in Latin music. When I was in undergrad, I attended San Jose State University, and one of my, I would say, paramount experiences was performing in the Latin Jazz Ensemble. And I had a chance to learn music from Latin America and Africa and Asia and Javanese gamelan and all of these different musical experiences. And that's one way to learn, to really become more aware about different cultures is through music. And that was my entryway into learning about new cultures and musical diasporas and things of that nature. And this project is really near and dear to me because, once again, I go back to this other picture, we're not at war, okay? We're not looking at each other from the lens of we're different cultures. We see ourselves as we're all brothers. We're all people coming together, we're collaborating to create music for the betterment of society. And when we think about music, when we look at it from a really global context, what is the true purpose of music? From my perspective, it is the search for truth, right? And really the arts as well. You're searching for truth. When you hear something and, it may not make sense to you because you're maybe not completely immersed or well-versed in a certain area of focus when it comes to music, but you can hear that there's some level of intrinsic quality that you may not be able to articulate, but because when we look at music, it's a search for truth. And part of that truth is the search for unity and the search for common brotherhood and love, which is what you see here. I didn't have a lot of money to pay these guys. I was like, look, I have a small budget, to work with, but I'm going to give you what you had. But they played their hearts out, and you can hear that on the album. So there are and one thing I want to point out is this experience actually created an experience for my students. So the person here in the middle that you see, Jonathan Chamberlain, he is the director of operations, and he was able to set up a full day, a full field trip at Capitol Studios for my University 101 students. And I teach a UNV 101 Dream Seminar. And as you can see here at the front of the room there, you see other students who, are around the same age as the freshmen there, 22, 23, they just graduated from different institutions, and they landed these really exciting jobs at one of the top music industry firms in the country. So this was a great experience for them because of this relationship here that culminated into an experience here that now for DH, that creates a certain level of capital that we can now utilize and keep building on. It doesn't stop there. We want to, now it's important a process to say, okay, now that you've gotten this degree, you have gone through the process and you've worked hard, there's something on the other side for you, okay? So the students love this experience. They had a chance to experience the studios and a live recording session with a major artist. And they were very welcoming. They were like, okay, this is the major recording, but you guys can like hang out. I was like, really? How does that work out? So these are the types of things we want to do, is create a level of success of going from college life to corporate life, making that smooth transition, tying those elements of music and business, creativity, art, all of those different aspects of things. And as you can see, there's a picture of us there if you're not familiar with the big building there, and the inside there. And also a colleague of mine was there to kind of help out with different things. And her boyfriend came along and helped me with the lunches. And it was a lot of work, but she was like, we're going to help you out. So that's the spirit of collaboration, is helping one another, collaborating. We're all working here because, you know, as you know, we have a fiduciary duty to the students to make sure that they are successful, you know. It's interesting story. I'm going to be really brief, but I want to talk about a success story. When I was a professor at Wayne State University, I had a student that she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And you know what? It was interesting because even though she battled cancer and she lost all of her hair, she was like so sick, completely ill. She never missed class. She never missed class. And she was still determined to go to graduate school. And I wrote her the best letter I could possibly write her, and was able to connect her with some of you know, my former colleagues at another university. And she went on to beat cancer. She got her MBA, and she's working for one of the top firms in New York. So that to me says, you know, if she can do it, stage 4 cancer, no hair, lost all of her hair due to the chemotherapy and all of these different things, and she can make a comeback. What does that say? That says that you can do anything if you really put your mind to it and you work as hard as you can. But you have to have a determination, okay? Because you have the resources. You have people that want to see you succeed and do well. But I always think about that. You know, that's one of my experiences that I'm like, wow, I've never experienced anything like that before. You know, I know if that was me, I'd probably given up. You know, it's like, I need to take a year off, you know, I'll come back later. But she didn't do that. Okay, so that's the level of dedication and things that you have to look at here. So those are some pictures. So I just want to leave you with that picture in mind, that we are all the same. We have our differences, but we all, you know, have the same feelings of love, and we all have the same needs of being feeling as though we are included, you know, and inclusion and things of that nature. But as you can see, you have to celebrate the differences of each other and appreciate what we bring to the picture, because then eventually it results in this. And I'll play my composition here. Let me just log out and find my composition. Let's see. I hope you can hear it okay. Is the volume okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, here we go. Okay, and thank you very much and for listening. And the name of that song, you'll never guess what the name of the song is. It's called Episode from a Village Dance. So how applicable, right? That is not an original composition. That song was written by Donald Brown, who was the professor emeritus at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And he's like one of my greatest inspirations and one of my former teachers, composition teachers that I studied with. And he wrote that piece a long time ago. And I was like, one day I'm gonna record that song, you know? But that song is entitled Episode of a Village Dance by Professor Donald Brown. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hal. You are a great colleague. So I enjoyed working with you in Senate this year. And what a wonderful way to help us end. I'm going to turn it over now to Professor Monique Turner to take us out.
Yes, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I just want to thank everyone for really being involved this academic year, because I know that, you know, we have a lot of work and we have a lot of deadlines, and sometimes it could be very overwhelming when we've been online learning and doing all of our work. And so this additional work and time and effort that you decided to take to commit toward anti-racism is really acknowledged. And I just want to thank all of the creators at our village that are very creative. We have a lot of creativity on our campus, and I'm happy that you all were able to share for this submission. And, we really look forward to continuing this next academic year. I think this is something that should be a part of our campus, about a part of our curriculum, in which we continue to talk about anti-racism, not only when something happens that is bad in our community, when it's shown on TV, right? But we want to kind of practice this on a daily basis. This should be a part of our daily routine, is checking in with our biases, checking in with the different images that we're using in our classroom, or the different words that we're using out of our own mouth. And so being more aware of that. And so I just want to thank everyone for joining. I want to thank the planning committee and all the student facilitators, the guest speakers, the moderators, and everybody who was behind the scenes to kind of help us make this happen. And so we hope that you guys can join us in our continued efforts as well. And so thank you and have a great evening.